Picture a woman who once commanded the respect of the most powerful nobles in Europe, now dragged through hostile streets in heavy iron chains while crowds scream for her blood. Imagine someone who had lived in magnificent palaces, worn priceless jewels, and ruled over a vast kingdom, reduced to walking barefoot through mud and filth toward her own execution. This was the final journey of Marie Antoinette, the last Queen of France, whose silent dignity during her death march became more powerful than any speech she could have given. For 6 agonizing days, she had been imprisoned, interrogated, and tortured by revolutionaries determined to break her spirit. But when they finally led her to the guillotine, her refusal to speak became the most defiant act of her entire life. Before we witness the final chapter of one of history's most tragic queens, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because Marie Antoinette's last stand reveals a courage that even her enemies couldn't destroy. Marie Antoinette's journey from the heights of royal power to the depths of revolutionary captivity began on the night of August 10, 1792, when the Swiss Guard died defending the Tuileries Palace while she, King Louis XVI, and their children fled for their lives to the Legislative Assembly. The woman who had once been called the most beautiful queen in Europe found herself a prisoner of the very people she had ruled. Her world transformed overnight from gilt and silk to stone walls and iron bars. The family's initial imprisonment in the Temple Tower was still relatively dignified, though psychologically devastating for someone accustomed to absolute deference. Marie Antoinette, now 37 years old, struggled to maintain her composure while watching her husband's authority crumble and their children grow pale and frightened in their confined quarters. She spent her days reading, embroidering, and trying to maintain some semblance of normal family life, while revolutionary crowds gathered outside, calling for their deaths. The execution of Louis XVI on January 21, 1793, shattered whatever remained of Marie Antoinette's world and transformed her from fallen queen to condemned prisoner. The revolutionaries who had once debated her fate now saw her as nothing more than a dangerous symbol of the old regime that needed to be eliminated. She was no longer Citizeness Capet, as they had mockingly renamed her. She was the Austrian bitch, whose very existence threatened the Republic's legitimacy. On August 1st, 1793, Marie Antoinette was separated from her children and transferred to the Conciergerie, a fortress prison that served as the antechamber to the guillotine. The former queen found herself in a damp, rat-infested cell, barely 8 feet square, with a straw mattress, a rickety table, and a chair as her only furnishings. The woman who had slept in beds worth more than most French peasants would earn in their lifetimes now shared her space with guards who watched her every move, even when she used the chamber pot. The Conciergerie was designed to break the spirits of those awaiting execution, and Marie Antoinette's treatment was particularly harsh. She was denied adequate clothing, proper food, and basic privacy, while being subjected to constant interrogations designed to extract confessions of treason and conspiracy. The revolutionaries wanted her to admit to plotting against France, corresponding with enemy armies, and betraying state secrets to her Austrian relatives. Despite the deplorable conditions, Marie Antoinette maintained a dignity that impressed even her jailers. She rose each morning, arranged her remaining hair as best she could, and conducted herself with the bearing of a queen even while wearing the simple white dress and cap that had replaced her elaborate court gowns. Her refusal to be broken by her circumstances became a form of resistance that frustrated her captors, who had expected her to collapse into pleading and desperation. The former queen's health deteriorated rapidly in the conciergeries' harsh conditions. She developed chronic stomach problems, her hair turned completely white, and her once famous beauty faded under the stress of constant fear and deprivation. Yet her spirit remained unbroken, and she began preparing herself for the death she knew was inevitable, spending her final weeks in prayer and quiet contemplation of the life that had brought her to this terrible end. Marie Antoinette's trial before the Revolutionary Tribunal began on October 14, 1793, but it was a legal proceeding in name only. A carefully orchestrated performance designed to provide a veneer of justice to what was essentially a predetermined execution. The former queen, now so weakened by her imprisonment that she could barely walk without assistance, faced charges that ranged from legitimate political accusations to absurd conspiracy theories that revealed more about revolutionary paranoia than royal crimes. The prosecutors, led by Antoine Fouquier-Tinville, accused Marie Antoinette of intelligence with foreign enemies, sending military plans to Austria, and corrupting her husband to resist the revolution's reforms. More bizarrely, they charged her with teaching her son counter-revolutionary ideas and even engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct that supposedly demonstrated her moral corruption and unfitness to have ever been France's queen. Marie Antoinette's responses to these accusations revealed a woman who had found unexpected strength in her suffering. She denied the charges calmly and consistently, refusing to provide the dramatic confessions or emotional breakdowns that might have satisfied the bloodthirsty crowds. When accused of sending French military secrets to Austria, she replied simply that she had never betrayed France, the country that had become her home when she married the Dauphin at age 14. The trial's most heartbreaking moment came when prosecutors forced her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles, to testify against his own mother, accusing her of sexual abuse and counter-revolutionary indoctrination. The boy, who had been separated from his family and subjected to months of psychological manipulation, repeated the lies his captors had taught him while Marie Antoinette listened in stoic silence, her maternal agony visible only in the tears she couldn't quite suppress. Throughout the proceedings, Marie Antoinette maintained the composure that had been drilled into her since childhood. She answered questions directly, denied false accusations firmly, and refused to give her enemies the satisfaction of seeing her grovel for mercy she knew would never come. Her dignity in the face of such cruelty impressed even some of her prosecutors, though it couldn't save her from their predetermined verdict. The trial's outcome was never in doubt. The Revolutionary Tribunal had been created to eliminate enemies of the Republic, not to dispense justice. Marie Antoinette's real crime was not treason, but symbolism. She represented everything the revolution claimed to oppose: hereditary privilege, foreign influence, and aristocratic excess. Her death would serve as a message to other European monarchs that the revolution would show no mercy to those who opposed it. On October 15th, after 2 days of legal theater, the tribunal announced its inevitable verdict. Marie Antoinette was guilty of conspiracy against the liberty of the nation and the security of the state. The sentence was death by guillotine, to be carried out the following morning. When the verdict was read, the former queen received it with the same quiet dignity that had characterized her entire trial, bowing her head slightly in acknowledgement, but saying nothing. As guards escorted her back to her cell for her final night on earth, Marie Antoinette had already begun the mental preparation for a death that would transform her from a symbol of royal excess into a martyr for monarchist cause and a testament to human dignity under the most extreme circumstances. Marie Antoinette spent her final night in the Conciergerie, writing what would become one of history's most poignant farewell letters, a document that revealed the spiritual transformation of a woman who had found grace and forgiveness even for those who were about to kill her. By candlelight, using a small pen and poor quality paper, she wrote to Madame Elisabeth, her sister-in-law, expressing not bitterness, but a profound sense of peace with her approaching death. In her letter, Marie Antoinette demonstrated the remarkable spiritual evolution she had undergone during her imprisonment. The woman who had once been criticized for her frivolity and materialism now wrote of dying free from hatred for those who condemn me and finding comfort in her faith that death would reunite her with her executed husband. She forgave her executioners, prayed for France's future, and expressed gratitude for the few kindnesses she had received even in her darkest hours. The former queen spent her remaining hours in prayer and quiet contemplation, preparing her soul for the journey ahead. She had requested the services of a non-juring priest, one who had refused to swear allegiance to the revolutionary government's religious reforms, and Abbé Girard provided her with final communion and spiritual counsel. The ritual gave Marie Antoinette the strength she needed to face her execution with the dignity that had become her final act of defiance. At 6 a.m. on October 16, 1793, the executioner Henri Sanson arrived at her cell to begin the grim preparations for her death. The man who had executed her husband 8 months earlier found Marie Antoinette already awake and dressed in the simple white muslin dress that had become her prison uniform. Her once magnificent blonde hair had turned completely white during her captivity and was roughly cut short to expose her neck for the guillotine's blade. The binding ritual was deliberately humiliating. Sanson tied Marie Antoinette's hands behind her back with coarse rope, a treatment typically reserved for common criminals rather than political prisoners. When she asked for a moment of privacy to change her chemise, which had been soiled during her final nervous moments, she was refused and forced to change in front of the male guards, a final humiliation designed to strip away her royal dignity. The preparations complete, Marie Antoinette was led from her cell through the corridors of the Conciergerie, past other prisoners who watched in silence as the former Queen of France walked toward her death. Some accounts suggest that a few prisoners knelt as she passed, recognizing her royalty even in her degraded circumstances, while others simply stared at the woman who had become the revolution's most famous victim. As the heavy prison doors opened to reveal the tumbril, the crude wooden cart that would carry her to the guillotine, Marie Antoinette saw for the first time the massive crowds that had gathered to witness her execution. The roar of thousands of voices calling for her death must have been overwhelming, but witnesses noted that her expression remained calm and resigned as she prepared for the final, most public ordeal of her life. The woman who had once traveled through Paris in golden carriages amid cheering crowds was about to make her last journey through the same streets, now filled with people who saw her death as the revolution's ultimate triumph. At 11 a.m. on October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette climbed into the rough wooden tumbril that would carry her through the streets of Paris to the Place de la Révolution, beginning a journey that would transform her from a fallen queen into an eternal symbol of dignity in the face of death. Unlike the closed carriage that had transported Louis XVI to his execution, Marie Antoinette was forced to endure her final humiliation completely exposed to the hostile crowds that lined every street. The former queen sat upright in the cart with her hands bound behind her back, maintaining perfect posture despite the vehicle's jolting movement over cobblestones. Her white dress, simple cap, and rope bindings created a stark contrast to the elaborate court gowns and priceless jewels that had once defined her public image. Most remarkably, throughout the entire 45-minute journey, Marie Antoinette maintained complete silence, refusing to give her enemies the satisfaction of hearing her plead, curse, or even acknowledge their existence. The crowds that gathered to witness her final journey represented every segment of Parisian society, from street vendors and laborers to bourgeois citizens and government officials. They hurled insults, threats, and occasionally objects at the cart. But Marie Antoinette never flinched or responded. Her silence became more powerful than any speech, demonstrating a strength of character that even her most dedicated enemies couldn't break. Contemporary accounts describe the eerie quality of her composure during this ordeal. Jacques-Louis David, the revolutionary artist who sketched her during the journey, captured a woman whose face showed neither fear nor defiance, but rather a kind of transcendent acceptance that impressed even hardened revolutionaries. Her silence wasn't the result of shock or terror. It was a deliberate choice that preserved her dignity and denied her executioners the complete victory they sought. The procession moved slowly through streets that had once celebrated her arrival in France as a teenage bride. Now, these same Parisians watched her passage with a mixture of bloodlust, curiosity, and, in some cases, unexpected sympathy. Several witnesses later wrote of feeling disturbed by her composure, as if her grace under such extreme circumstances forced them to confront the humanity of someone they had been taught to see as a monster. When the tumbril finally reached the Place de la Révolution, Marie Antoinette saw the guillotine that awaited her, the same machine that had ended her husband's life and the lives of thousands of other victims of revolutionary justice. The scaffold was surrounded by an enormous crowd, estimated at over 20,000 people, all eager to witness the death of the woman they held responsible for France's suffering. Marie Antoinette stepped down from the cart with assistance from the executioner, her dignity intact despite the weakness caused by months of imprisonment and poor health. As she walked toward the scaffold, her silence continued, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere that hushed even the bloodthirsty crowd. In her final moments, she accidentally stepped on Henri Sanson's foot and reportedly said, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur," the only words she spoke during her entire journey to death, an apology that revealed her fundamental courtesy even in extremis. At 12:15 p.m., Marie Antoinette knelt before the guillotine. Her head was placed in the lunette, and with a single stroke, the blade ended the life of France's last queen. Her silence had been broken only by an apology, a final act of grace that defined her character even in death. The next time you face a moment that tests your character, remember Marie Antoinette's final journey. A woman who chose dignity over desperation and silence over surrender. Her last act wasn't one of royal privilege, but of human grace, proving that true nobility comes not from birth, but from how we face our darkest moments. If this story of courage in the face of ultimate adversity moved you, smash that like button. Subscribe for more untold tales of history's most remarkable final moments. And hit that notification bell, because the most powerful lessons often come from those who found strength when everything else was taken away. What other historical figures do you think showed remarkable dignity in their final moments? Share your thoughts in the comments below.